In today's show, it's a mailbag episode. We got listener questions about Josh Hart's future in Portland, Yusuf Nurkic's play early this season, and what GP2 is going to bring when he returns to the lineup. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for making this show your first listen every single day. It's free on all platforms, including YouTube, 5 days a week. Come join us. Tell your friends to do the same. Make it your first listen. It's your team every day. Today's episode is a mailbag episode. We're going to answer listener-submitted questions all episode long. If you want to get involved in a future mailbag episode, the best way to do that is to email me. LockedOnBlazersPod@gmail.com is the address. LockedOnBlazersPod@gmail.com is the address. That's the best way to get in contact with me, period. If you have friends who've emailed me, they will tell you that I respond to 80% of the emails. I'm pretty good about it. That is a great way to reach me, a great way to get your questions into the show. You can also follow me on Twitter, and day of the show, I will send out a tweet soliciting questions. You respond to that tweet. I will do my best to get you in the show. We've reached a saturation point where I have 60 questions this week, which is incredible. We've maybe more than 60. Email boxes is overflowing. The tweet I sent out has more responses than I could possibly get to in an episode. That is awesome. I feel really wonderful that you are all supporting the show in that manner. That is so darn cool to me. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for telling your friends. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for wanting to be involved. This team has been so darn good. I'm glad that you are excited about it. But it made sorting through these a little bit easier. Or a little bit more challenging. So to make it easier on me, quite frankly, there were some big themes that were touched on by many question askers. So we're going to stick with the sort of the largest questions. We got three of the most common questions that were asked. That's what we're going to handle on today's mailbag. If you asked a question that's evergreen, I'll get to it in the future. I save them. I got an organization system for them. No worries. But I'm overwhelmed by the popularity of this particular mailbag episode, and I am deeply appreciative of it as well, even if that word tripped me up a little bit there. So let's get into it. The first big question, the first overarching question that everyone asks is, "Hey, Mike, you still think they're going to trade Josh Hart?" And this goes back to something I'd been saying during the offseason and leading up to the start of the season, is that I thought Josh Hart was the most tradable player on the roster and that he was the most likely player to be traded. And let me tell you, Josh Hart's been ballin'. He's been fantastic. He's been a joy. He's been a delight. Josh Hart might be my favorite player to watch play basketball in the NBA right now. And I am someone who spends a lot of time watching NBA League Pass. I adore watching Josh Hart. He is a treat. But him playing well doesn't make him less tradable. That's not how this works. Let's tease this out a little bit, though, because why he's tradable, there's kind of a lot that goes into it. And I think it's worth considering sort of all of the circumstances. Josh Hart will very likely be a free agent next summer. He has a player option on his contract for just shy of $13 million. For the sake of this podcast, we'll call it $13 million. He has the Blazers, it's non-guaranteed, so if he opts in, there's a world that the Blazers could choose not to guarantee it. It's like a dual option, and it would be a strange confluence of events where he came back on that deal. He is almost certainly going to enter free agency, sign a multi-year contract either with the Blazers or with someone else, and keep it moving because he's a good basketball player. He is not the only person that the Blazers have who is entering free agency this summer. Jeremy Grant is entering free agency. To a lesser extent, Justice Winslow is entering free agency. Jeremy Grant has been awesome. Jeremy Grant has been rumored to also be interested in a 4-year maximum contract extension, which I believe is in the range of $112 million. It's like $28 million a year for Jeremy Grant. If they pay Jeremy Grant, it doesn't mean they cannot pay Josh Hart. but it means they would very likely be a luxury tax paying team next season if they were to retain both gentlemen. There is probably some reasonable questions whether this particular ownership group is interested in being a luxury tax team and how far they would be willing to dip into the luxury tax. I think they'll end up paying it. They'll just have to. Like, Damian Lillard is getting paid too much money. Every time he's getting paid too much money. You gave Yusuf Nurkic a big contract too. Like, at some point in the next couple seasons, they're going to end up being a tax team probably, but it's a appetite for how much they want to do that. And so that factors in. Josh Hart's pending free agency in conjunction with Jeremy Grant's pending free agency and ability to sign a big contract and probably being worth a big contract, at least in the very, very early returns of the season, factor in. Also, the Blazers could stand an upgrade in the front court. Josh Hart is fantastic. And I was talking to some friends today and they said, like, they were asking me the same thing. Like, you still think they trade Josh Hart? He seems to be the guy. And I was like, can you imagine this team without Josh Hart? And one of them said, hell no. Like, he's been, like, heart and soul is an overused word. And it's like, feels really cliche because the name's Josh Hart, but he is everywhere and he's wonderful. And he is I think the better word for it that I've settled on here is tone setter. He has been a phenomenal tone setter for this team. He only plays at one speed and one rate. You cannot turn the volume down on Josh Hart. He goes hard at all times. He is playing full throttle. And that is what is so freaking enjoyable about him. He's snatching rebounds at 6'5". He plays like a dang center. He's a delight. Dude's a delight. So it's hard to imagine right now them trading Josh Hart, right? Because he's just the perfect thing that they have, the perfect tone setter for what they need. But they could use some more size. They could use a Josh Hart who's 6'9". Like they could just use a bigger version of him. Hard to trade Josh Hart straight across for someone who's just like a little bit taller version of Josh Hart. Hard to do that, hard to make that upgrade. But you can't get better in trades by trading players who are worse. Josh Hart's talent makes him tradable. That's how this works. It's just, I think that's just like that's the I don't know, uncomfortable but real truth of the situation. Absolutely, that is the truth of the situation. So I don't think, to answer the question in a long-winded way, as I intended to, I don't think that my stance has necessarily changed. I think Josh Hart was the most tradable player on the team at the beginning of the year. I think Josh Hart has kicked ass for the first 4 games of the season, kicked butt, but like he's still the piece that would be most likely to be traded if you were to be chasing an upgrade because he is talented. And because he is on an expiring or likely to be expiring contract. If you trade him to a good team, he will help that good team win because he's a really good basketball player and you might be able to get something back. Or if there are a bunch of teams that are entering the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes and selling off talented veterans, it's a chance for you to trade them Josh Hart in exchange for maybe multiple players to boost your depth, juice the end of the bench and get 2 pretty good players in exchange for a darn good player in Josh Hart, and the team of taking on Josh Hart wouldn't be burdened by future money. I think there's a scenario where, at some point the Utah Jazz are going to have to get bad, but like that's a future problem for them. I think several teams are going to bail out of this thing in February and say we would like to be bad because we want a chance at drafting a generational talent in Victor Wembanyama, and I think the Blazers could be, if they're a team heading in the other direction, a team that benefits from that, and Josh Hart could be the vehicle that gets it done. It doesn't mean Josh Hart's bad. It doesn't mean that he isn't the absolute perfect tone setter for this team, the perfect player for what Chauncey Billups wants to do, and all of those things. It's just the nature of the business. There's a financial component, and there's a reality of how you get better with trades, which is trading good players. Sometimes you got to give up stuff to get stuff, and Josh Hart might be the best stuff the Blazers can give up. That said, I love watching Josh Hart. And I'm lucky enough to go to a bunch of these games, a bunch of these home games. Watching him in person is a joy. And selfishly, I would like to continue doing that for a while. So, I don't know, stick around, dog. Don't do it. But, I think the logic that I had in the preseason that people were wondering if it changed the way Josh Hart had played. No, Josh Hart rocks, and he still rocks, and that doesn't make him less tradable. It just It is what it is. All right, I got more questions coming up about in the second segment about Jusuf Nurkic and Drew Eubanks, a center tandem for the Blazers. But first, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why people have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. You got to do it. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right folks for your team faster and for free. You can use their simple tools like screening questions, which make it easier to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's keep it rolling on this glorious Mailbag Wednesday. When you're listening to a classic Mailbag Wednesday here. Not alliterative, but a special delivery mailbag just the same. So in the mountain of questions I got that, again, I'm very thankful for, the next most common question, actually this was the third most common question, but the next most common question is ending the show. It's about Gary Payton II. Stick around for that one. It's a fun discussion. Join me there in a moment, but let's talk Nurk. A lot of folks were curious about Jusuf Nurkic's play early in the season and what I think of it. There were questions that range from what can we get for trading Jusuf Nurkic? And the simple answer is another similar trading an expensive decent center gets you expensive decent center. That is the most likely thing. The other was, is Drew Eubanks better than Jusuf Nurkic? I don't think so. Drew Eubanks is fun and good, and he plays really hard. You do not get cheated in the Drew Eubanks minutes, but Nurk's passing ability, his rebounding, he's really good manipulating dribble handoffs in a way that Drew Eubanks isn't quite there yet. He's better than Drew. I don't think Jusuf Nurkic has been big. So the overarching questions, they range from a lot of different ways, but the overarching question is what do they do with this guy? And the answer is probably nothing. And I don't mean that to be dismissive of the concern. I just mean that in the reality, this is who Jusuf Nurkic is. The frustrating rushing his finishes is who he is. The inconsistent play is who he is. The highs, like when he played against the Suns and he was darn good controlling the glass and guarding DeAndre Ayton, that's part of who he is. The lows, like in the game 1 against Sacramento, or I thought he wasn't very good against the Lakers at all. And even his early struggles against the Nuggets, where he could not find the bucket and missed a whole bunch of layups in that first quarter. The lows are part of it. He is at an age in the NBA where guys don't really add a significant amount to their game. They tweak around the edges. They sharpen some skills. They get a little better here and there. They get smarter. They're just they've seen a lot, so their recognition of patterns in the league get a little better, so they're smarter on offense and defense because they've just seen a lot of NBA basketball and can recognize it quickly. That stuff improves. Your skills are your skills for the most part. Nurk is who he is. His highs are pretty high, his lows are pretty frustrating, and he can be frustrated. Watching him, it's easy to get frustrated with the lows because sometimes he compounds a bad mistake with 3 more. It's what longtime listener Liam, my homie Triple L, calls foul momentum. It's when Nurk picks up one stupid foul and then he picks up a second stupid foul because he's just caught the momentum. Shout out to Triple L. It doesn't mean that Nurk is bad. It doesn't mean that Nurk is actually good and that you're missing it. Consistency is his thing. It's just his thing. He's not consistent, and that's who he is and who he's going to be. He's still the best center on the roster, and there's some nights where they desperately need him. I think the best sign for Jusuf Nurkic was the Denver Nuggets game where he was buns to begin the game. He was bad, and he found a way to be impactful and still, he committed a foul on literally the first defensive possession, and that foul was 30 feet from the rim. It was putting his hands on someone, on Nikola Jokic. beyond the 3-point line, maybe his heels on the 3-point line, 24 and a half feet from the rim, like committing a foul on the first snap of the game, and then he missed a bunch of layups. And then I thought he really found it and was competent and useful. He wasn't like, he didn't have this monster game, but he continued to rebound. He continued to be physical and aggressive against Nikola Jokic. He didn't back down. He didn't compound four mistakes with just being unplayable and them having to go another direction. Sure, Drew Eubanks came in and played well. I thought Drew Eubanks came in and was just does what he does. He was a pest. He gets up in your shirt, and those minutes are valuable. But Nurk is still pretty clearly their best center, and you're just going to have to take him warts and all. For those of you looking for an out, it's funny, whenever I ask mailbag questions, they're always about trades. Like, that's what people get excited about, is player movement. And I get it, but like, it's a little early in the season for that. No, let's wait till like December 15th is really like the earnest start of trade season, and like the real start of trade season is January. So like we're a little ways away from that. It's October. You're listening to Wednesday, October 26th show. So to answer the questions about your, am I concerned about Nurk? I mean, not any more than I was before. This is who he is. In the player capsule preview, I talked all about consistency. When he has bouts of pretty serious inconsistency, and the lows are low, and you feel it. And it's like there's some nights when the Blazers are able to go small, and then they did so against the Kings, but you can't do that every night. You need him in there to defend Anthony Davis. You need him in there to defend DeAndre Ayton, which he did really well. You need him in there to guard and bother Nikola Jokic, which I thought he did pretty good. He was, after a rough start, pretty good. Like, you just gotta take it with what you can get. Nurk is being paid a bunch of money. He's going to be hard to trade in the near term. He is the Blazers' path. A good version of Yusuf Nurkic is the Blazers' path to probably being a consistently good defense to some extent. I worry that he doesn't fit what they want to do schematically, and at some point it's going to bite them, but it's who they have, and they didn't, because they weren't able to swing a larger trade when they came to free agency and had to sign Nurk. If they didn't choose to give Nurk the money, they were going to end up with minimum centers. Like, they weren't going to have money to sign a center somewhere else. They gave the mid-level to Gary Payton. They would end up with no center. Maybe somewhere in there you think that that's a better option, but like, the problem is really just like the length of Nurk's contract, probably not the average annual value of it. He's going to be hard to trade in the near term. I think they are mostly stuck with him. I will say Drew Eubanks plays really hard, and he's really fun, and I wouldn't give him like way more minutes than Nurk, but he can, on nights when his lack of range offensively, he doesn't really shoot from outside the paint. He's really good to shoot hook shots, but he's not going to get post touches, and he's a decent roll man. There are nights when Drew Eubanks can be a totally fine second option, totally like alternative, totally useful alternative. But I'm not at the point where I think that that's the way for them to go by any means. Okay, let's talk Gary Payton II to close the show. Gary Payton is likely to be they'll probably get a health update on Gary Payton later this week if the Blazers are true to their word, and that means that he could return to the lineup. Let's talk about what that might look like to close the show. But first, let me tell you about BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action, whatever that might be. Every single NBA game, every single NFL game, college football all day long. You want to bet on boxing. You want to bet on MMA. You want to bet on golf. You want to bet on tennis. You want to bet on North American soccer leagues in their final stages of the playoffs. You want to bet on soccer in Europe or all over this globe. You can go do that. You want to bet on the AFL, the Australian Football League. You can go do that as well. It's all out there, baby. Go check it out. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We're still rolling along with Mailbag. This was the second most common question. The number one most common question I got was about Josh Hart. The second most common question was about Gary Payton II. Everyone wants to know, what's up with Gary? When's he coming back? And when he comes back, what's it going to look like? Literally had 4 emails in my inbox with all nearly identical questions. And by my count on my sheet, let me look. I had 11 separate tweets about it. So that's 15 Gary Payton II questions. Everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know about Gary Payton, so let's talk about Gary Payton. The Blazers announced that he'll be reevaluated in 2 weeks at the beginning of October. That 2-week timeline would necessitate, I don't think that's the right word because it's not necessary. They can do whatever they want, unfortunately. But like in a perfect world, the Blazers would have to give a health update on Gary Payton at the end of this week, Thursday or Friday of this week. They would do us a solid by giving us an update on Gary Payton's health. From what I understand, he's not back playing 5-on-5 basketball yet, so it does not. I haven't heard. That was like maybe 10 days ago, and a little less than that, maybe 4 days ago, last week sometime, that he wasn't back playing full 5-on-5, full contact basketball yet. He just wasn't doing much basketball stuff. If he's not doing much basketball stuff last week, it's hard for me to believe this week is going to be like, yeah, Gary Payton's playing this weekend. So we're talking November by the time he plays basketball again. It's just, I think it's a question of, is it, the end of the first week of November or the end of the third week in November? I don't, maybe we'll get clarity on that later in the week. But I think right now we just don't, I don't know. And I haven't heard an update since I had inquired on what was GP doing. And what I had heard was not 5-on-5 full contact basketball. He's not doing that yet. And you would assume that they want him to like get back and play, getting some practices. They don't really practice much and play much in once the season starts because just games happen all the time. But they got 4 days off this weekend. Maybe he can get back out on the floor and you can they'll get a sense of where he's at physically and then have a better sense of what may come in his future. But he's going to play at some point, you would assume. And when he does, it will be, he's going to play. Like, it's not like he's out of the rotation. No one has outplayed him. I would assume that Gary Payton takes the Justice Winslow role. Winslow is playing your 17 minutes a night off the bench type of role, 14 to 17 minutes a night off the bench type of role. You can stretch it a little more when you need it. When they went small, he played a little longer. But like, I think Gary Payton takes Justice Winslow's minutes. I think Justice Winslow is still in the rotation. I think Nassir Little's still in the rotation. I think Shaedon Sharpe's still in the rotation. I think Drew Eubanks plays on darn near every night. I think they just play 10. Right now, they're playing 9 guys. A 9-man rotation is the most common rotation in the NBA because you play your starters in the low 30s. You play 2 guys off the bench in the low 20s. You play another guy off the bench in the teens. You play someone else 10 minutes a night. Bing, bang, boom. That's your rotation. Mix and match based on whatever your positional needs are. But you can play 10. 10 is not out of the question. 11 is also almost impossible. Steve Kerr gets away with it because he's a mastermind and a wizard, and he runs he is singular in that regard. He can really get away with getting 11 in, but it's too many. Like, it's just, you can't get guys real shifts. You're playing someone 1 4-minute shift, which is just like not enough time. You run up and down a couple times, you get a couple touches. You're just not playing basketball. You don't get any rhythm. You could play 10 though, and I think that's what they'll do. I think they'll play 10 guys because I don't think you stop playing Shaedon Sharpe. That would be a mistake. I don't think you totally nix Eubanks and only go small off the bench. You're going to need big minutes at some point. A lot of teams have other centers, so you're going to need a second center in there. Justice Winslow's been good. Nassir Little, after a shaky opener, has been really, really solid, bringing at least one midi pull up every game and good energy off the bench. Like, he's not playing a ton of minutes, but he's been good. I don't think you nix his role. So I think you just play 10. And I think Gary Payton plays basically the Winslow role. Like, he's like, comes in and plays a little bit of small forward, gets to play a little bit of like 3 or whatever it is, but you might play alongside Winslow and Josh Hart. So it's like, I don't think positions are super meaningful in that case. We'll see who he guards. But like, the trick will be, if you play 10, to always have one of Damian Ant on the floor. I do not think you want to go with a full 5-man unit. I just don't straight up do not want them to have a full 5-man bench unit on the floor. I think that's for lower levels of basketball than the NBA. You got to get your good players on the floor. You got to stagger your good players. That's how NBA coaching works. So I think that's a little bit of a challenge, but I think pencil in Gary Payton for 17 minutes a night. when he's ready to go and pencil him in for playing like the Justice Winslow role. A little bit of 3, a little bit of 4, some tough defensive assignments, some, not a lot of on-ball reps or touches on offense, but that type of defensive impact. I think Gary Payton's going to be really good. Like, you watch the way this team plays when they're able to play the minutes with Hart and Winslow and Grant. Imagine just more minutes with more plus defenders on the court. Imagine Gary Payton just eating a little bit into Nasir Little's minutes, so he's like really only playing 9 minutes a night. He's playing 2 4.5-minute shifts each half, and Gary Payton just eats into his minutes a night. That's like, the defense looks good, and you add another more like a dude who will compete and get after it on defense. That's 100% why he's in the league and getting paid, and has some defensive versatility, can switch more, can get after it, is one of the best theft artists in the league, one of the best steal and block guys for his position in the league. Would have led the league in steal percentage if he had played more minutes. Like, he can cause turnovers and make it happen. That's exactly what they want to do on offense. He's going to fit and be great. I just don't think he's not in line for a huge role, and he's not going to steal anyone's minutes. I just think they go 10 deep. We will see when he gets back. It'll happen in the 11th month, though. It's going to happen in November. We'll just see when in November it is. I think that is truly the big question. That is going to do it for Mailbag. Thanks so much for asking all the questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm gonna misuse the word like athletes do. It's very humbling. That's not what humbling means. It's literally the exact reverse of humbling. I'm not humbled by it, but I am like appreciated by it. It's like it's an ego boost, right? It's like all of you want to ask questions. It feels incredible. I love it. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for being excited about the show. Thank you for being excited about this basketball team. Thanks for rocking with me. Thank you. I appreciate you. I really do. If you want to get involved in a future mailbag, ask a question at lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. That is the best way to get in touch with me, period. You can tweet at me, and I'll maybe tweet back something snarky. But if you want to ask me a question that I'll respond to, the email address is the way to do it, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. I'll put it in the episode description for this episode if you forget it. Tell your friends about this podcast. The way people hear about podcasts is word of mouth. Like, that's... there used to be this whole thing, rate and review and like and subscribe, and do that. Like and subscribe. Make sure you're everywhere on the pod. Like, wherever you're listening to this podcast, make sure you subscribe. Do that. That matters. But the way that you can help me grow the show is to tell your friends about it. They'll say, hey, the Blazers are awesome. I'm excited about them. I want to get into the team. How do you get into the team? You say, I listen to Locked On Blazers every single day. Tell them it's available on all platforms. Tell them it's 5 days a week. Tell them it's free wherever they're looking for us. Just search Locked On Blazers and you'll find us. Why don't you make your second listen of the day Locked On NBA? 30 minutes on the biggest stories in the league from the local experts in every market. Check it out. It's a bunch of fun. It's on YouTube and everywhere else. I appreciate you listening. The Blazers play a basketball game tomorrow. They play the Miami Heat. We will have, or tonight, I guess, as you're listening to this, I'm recording this on Tuesday evening. But they play a basketball game tonight. They play the Miami Heat. I'll be there. I will record a show after that happens. Check us out. That's what we do. It's a daily podcast. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.